Hey there, and welcome to today's real-time acrylic landscape lesson. Here we are going to take this lovely little canvas and turn it into a somber fall scene. As per usual, this is going to be a real-time painting tutorial. We're going to take it step by step. If you are a beginner, I think that this is a great entry point, but we're also going to do a real deep dive. So if you've been painting for quite some time, maybe you're more of an intermediate advanced painter, you should hopefully still learn some things and get to do a very complex painting by the end. So stick with me. This is going to be a really fun one. It's also worth noting that if you'd like help with the drawing process, I will have the traceable up over on Patreon, where you can also get the real-time drawing video. You can watch me sketch it all out, talk about the composition, how we're going about all of that. And up there again, you'll also have the bonus lesson where we add all of the bonus fall colors. Though I don't think that this one needs it. That's really just if you want to take it in that direction. So with that, let's jump in. Let's have some fun. Let's make something beautiful together. Okay, so we're going to begin our painting here today with a 1-inch flat-headed brush. We are going to make sure that it's nice and damp, but not wet. We want to extend the wet life of our paint. We want to allow it to dry a little bit slower, but we don't want to thin it down too much. With that, we're going to begin in the sky, as we typically do, as it's easy to layer on top of, and it's just a nice, comfortable place to start. Grab a lot of titanium white, hint of our ultramarine blue, and maybe the smallest hint of our oxide black as well. That'll just gray down the saturation in the blue, and we'll go for a pretty bright initial mix. Now we're going to apply this right towards the top center. Easy beginnings. We'll work it in between our tree here, though if we cover up the tree, that's okay. We can always resketch it in. Work that on the other side, as you can see. And then, before we continue to get the bottom, the left, and the right, I'm actually going to make it a little bit more blue and a little bit darker. That way we have a gradient, and we can see light shift in the sky to a point. So we're just going to apply this down towards the bottom, like so. We'll apply it into some openings in our tree, like that. Nothing too complex. And we have a lot of openings over here, which we will cover to a point with greenery and foliage, but for now, I think we just move this throughout. Now, once this is all applied, we're going to head back over here. We'll do an X-shaped pattern to blend our highlights into our shadows. And I like an X-shaped pattern for these blends because it moves paint not only left and right, but also up and down. So you get all of the movements. It's really, really easy. Now I think we double down on the titanium white heavy mix for that top midsection, because as we do that first mix, it makes everything a little bit more blue. There we go. Now, as we get a little closer, you can see in the reference photo, we have these distant green trees right here. They have a lot of light working through them. That's right through here, and we want to paint those next. So we'll grab some of our Sap Green. I love Sap Green because it's quite muted. It's not too saturated in any direction. It's not too bright or dark. It's just very flexible. So in a painting like this, where you want these subdued greens that are quite bright, but then also a bit more rich in the shadows, this is a fantastic green. So we're grabbing some of that, again, Sap Green, a little bit of our titanium white, we brighten it up. We could gray it down with the Oxide Black, but I think I'm actually quite happy with this. And then I'm going to switch to an old flat-headed brush. Now this is something that I purchased at the dollar store about a decade ago, and it looks pretty rough, pretty disheveled. That's how it should look. We're actually going to make it look more so. So while it's dry, I'm going to peel back the bristles. And it's worth noting that if you've purchased my brush set in the past, I would not do this with one of those brushes. I would just go ahead and get a really cheap brush. You can peel like this. It will somewhat return to normal when you make it damp and wet, clean it, but it will always be a little bit rough. So I like to have brushes specifically for this technique. You've probably seen this technique before if you watch the channel, but I'm essentially just going to start tapping on some greens into the background, into the sky. And this is a great technique to create these soft transitions that feel quite misty, quite distant. The more you bring it up into this light area, the more transparent it'll get, the more it'll blend with the white, the brighter it will get, which is really nice because it creates these easy, soft implications in the background. That said, let's zoom out a little bit and let's mix a little bit more paint. Okay, so again, we'll grab a bit more of our pigments. That's Sap Green, that's Titanium White, and that's a good start. Doesn't need to be too complicated, especially in the background. Then we'll tap that over here. We'll be adding a lot of foliage in and around these applications as well. This is really just to get us started, and I like this as a start because it is nice and easy. It's difficult to get wrong, and it's just getting that white canvas with some paint on it. I'm essentially covering all of the edges of our blue because the edges that have sky will be quite bright. We'll have a lot of light working through them. And then we can also do these subtle taps in this larger nebulous area just to show that there is little bits of foliage poking in and around. We can apply this around some of the blue that we have over here, though I am being careful not to overdo it. And again, if you cover up your drawing, that's okay. We can always go back and resketch it. If you are up over on Patreon, you can download the traceable. You can even watch the real-time drawing video where I'm sketching out the painting as well. So you don't just see the line work, you can also see why I'm making the markings that I am and organizing it in the way that we do. That said, this is a great start. Now we're going to make the green a little bit darker. So we'll add some more Sap Green. We'll add a little bit of our Oxide Black. Just like so. It's not a dark green yet, but it is a little bit darker. It's a little bit more gray. And it's exactly what we need for this next set of taps, which again, I'm doing with this old flat-headed brush to create this nice misty look in those distant trees. Now we don't want to put this around the true edges because this is quite a bit darker. The light isn't working through it in the same way. Instead, we're going inwards. And here we have a larger area of green, so we can kind of put it in the middle because there won't be that much light working through the middle. It'll get too dense. It's also worth noting that we'll cover up a lot of this later with different kinds of trees. We're going to have multiple kinds of trees. We're really going to layer this in largely complex and dimensional ways, but just to get us started, this is a nice and easy way to break in the white canvas. I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of just struggle with getting started sometimes, and getting something on the canvas can be the most important part. So we just start applying paint and then we move it around until we like it. That said, we're going to make this a little bit darker as we continue. So more Sap Green for the mix, more Oxide Black for the mix. Again, we don't want to make it truly dark. We're looking for something in between, just like so. Now we'll apply this underneath. Try to keep that nice, distinct, sharp impression showing through. A big part of what we're doing here is creating those little taps from individual bristles, and that's rendering individual minute markings within the trees and the foliage. It makes it look like there are distant clusters of foliage. And every time we change values, as we've done now 3 times, we create an extra layer of depth to make it a little bit more interesting. There we go. Trying to make it move up in unique ways. We don't want it to be perfectly uniform from top to bottom. We want it to be changing and varied. So we might do some little taps throughout for the sake of making it more neat. And you know what? I think we have a tree here, a tree here. We have a midsection here, which in theory should have some extra foliage. So I'll just tap that through. Then we can do our trees on either side. It's a little bit dark towards the top, but that's okay. We can apply different foliage to it later in the process. That said, as we get down here, you can see that it's starting to get a bit blocky. We don't have that variance that we once had. So I'm actually going to go a little bit brighter again, right through here, and then we're going to go darker right under that. And by layering it this way, we can avoid having the background be too dark, because we don't want it to be, right? We want that value saved for the foreground. We want the background to look a little more misty, a little more nebulous. So we just add in these lighter values. And essentially what's happening here is additional foliage is protruding, it's catching more light, it's just moving outwards so that it isn't so inset, it's not casting shadow on itself to the same degree. But we're really just trying to get those taps back and forth so that we have variance of value. Darks and lights, greens of all different values. Now let's go a little bit darker again. Sap Green, Oxide Black. We can even go a little bit of our Ultramarine Blue if we want. This will make it slightly cooler, which is nice. We're adding some cool tones into the shadows towards the bottom. Just continue bringing that down. I think we go darker, we go more blue. Towards the very bottom, it will probably be the darkest in this area because, of course, the subject is casting shadows upon itself. But we don't want it to be too dark. Right now I'm mixing up a lot of paint because we have a pretty large area to cover. But there we go. Hope you're enjoying the lesson, by the way. I know we're taking it a little bit slower than the lessons from last month. I did dive back into the 15-minute paintings for a while. Now we're playing with the longer one. I feel like inspiration as an artist just is moving often. That's the way we like it. Keeps us inspired, keeps us creating. Right now I just feel like I wanted to do a longer lesson. But I also thought about the 15-minute paintings in that series could be fun as a drawing series as well. Because I know a lot of you have mentioned that you love painting, but you kind of struggle with the drawing process. And maybe we teach some fundamentals of drawing and how to do more complex landscapes. But maybe we do it in that 15-minute period so that it's not intimidating. That way it stays digestible, that way it stays something you can, oh my, just do here and there. I've been dropping my brushes a lot lately. I don't know what's changed. I feel like I didn't used to do that. It's okay, we have more unique mixes now. Always a silver lining, right? That said, this bottom area, a little bit darker, as you can see. We're going to continue that out here, working around some trees, but not all of them, because I will just resketch on our sketch when I need to. Right now we're just continuing those values in the ways that we need to. Now I might save myself some time, take a little bit of this greenery, this large flat-headed brush. I'll follow the edge of the path, bring it to the corner, and then, just so it's texturally consistent, we'll just tap in the rest of these little markings. Nice and easy. And I think we'll also take a little bit of that, throw it on this side, work it up. Again, nice and easy. We love to see it. And a little bit up there maybe too. There we go. So the idea is that we move into darker values as we move forward, as we move into the darker clusters of foliage. This is a really good start, I think. And now, at this point, finally, we can actually take this brush and we can make sure that it's cleaned properly. You don't really want to wet it during the painting process because you don't want to condense your bristles, and you'll get much sharper individual markings when it is dry. But eventually that paint does dry on it, and we want to retain our brush for years to come. So I'm just adding a lot of water, cleaning it up well. We'll just dry it off on our cloth right down here. And let that dry out. But as you can see, pretty good. Now, again, we have a good start in the background. We have a lot of detailed trees in the midground to foreground, both on the right and the left-hand side. We have all of the larger tree trunks. So there's a lot we could do. I think I actually want to start with the larger foliage that moves through here. It'll just be a good way to continue using our greens. Our brush already has a lot of green on it. We do need to move into dark greens, saturated greens, and so we're already in that realm. That said, I'll add some more sap green to my mix, saturate it a little bit more, a little bit less of the blue in the mix will show through because it'll be overtaken by the green. And here we have a nice dark green. It's not as dark as we can go, and that's good because I want to save those darker values for later layers, but this is a great beginning. And there are a lot of different ways we could incorporate these branches, these little ones. There's a meticulous way, and I'll show you that first with your liner brush. As you can see, this is pretty dry, so the bristles actually stick out and round dramatically. Once we wet it though, we take off that excess pigment, it gets much, much sharper. Great for detail work, and now because it's a little bit damp, the pigment will glide. With that, again, you can re-sketch on these branches. I think I can actually see a little bit of it through the paint though, so I'm good to proceed, and I'm just going to start sketching our branches like this. We want the very edge of it to be the smallest possible, and then we can do little protrusions which make their way outwards. And our first couple of branches, I'm not going to lie to you, are probably going to look a little artificial before we get enough of them and they start to look unique. We have another one that kind of bends in. I'm just looking at the reference photo right now. And then in theory they meet over here. The goal with these is that they are always changing. There's always variance. You're not doing two branches which look the same back to back. You can do two branches that look similar in between three other branches, but you really want to stagger those aesthetics. So here, up top, we're bringing these back towards this midpoint, probably this tree. And then as we get lower, we get something that extends farther. It's a bit larger as a whole. It's not that it's longer, it's also more thick. You can leave little openings in between some of these branches to make it more interesting. There we go. Again, this is the long way of doing it. It's the meticulous way. There aren't really right or wrong ways. It's really just about how you prefer engaging in the creative process with these. But I'll show you some other ways as well. So that's the beginning. Another way we can begin is with our stiff bristled fan brush. We're not going to wet this because we don't want to condense our bristles. We will grab it, as you can see. And then I will say, okay, you know what, I want a branch right here. So I'm going to do a little drag out like that, and then some little markings down. Let's say we want one right here. We'll go a little bit lower, drag out, little markings. Oh, we have some dramatic winds outside today. That's fun, atmospheric. Wow. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's pretty neat. Always loved the extremities in weather. One of my favorite painters, Thomas Cole, painted a lot of storms in wooded areas. He had the bending and broken trees. They were very dramatic. And this is a much more calm setting, but I feel like the dramatic weather days inspire me. That said, there's our example of using the fan brush. I'm actually going to wet this right now because I want to take a break from it. I want to go back to the liner because if you start with that fan brush, what you can do is you can add on to it with the liner quite shortly after. Create more details, more intentionality. The other one is better for creating more markings and quicker, but after a certain point you might want to refine. And at that point, we have this brush, and it's doing great. Maybe we head on up here to the top, create more of these. Again, I can still kind of see my sketch through some of the paint, which is a good indicator that I actually should probably use a thicker base coat. But I think with all the layering of foliage we'll have, it'll be just fine. Just friendly reminder, you do want nice thick bases. Lots of branches. You can see how they're intersecting, overlapping. That's also important. There we go. Now, for the sake of learning, let's just make sure that we have a good amount of paint here. Let's go back to our fan brush, and let's use it now that it's wet, just so you can see the difference. I'm going to try to dry this to the best of my ability, though it will still have paint on it. You can see that it forks now, so rather than having all of the individual bristles, we have clusters of bristles, and that means it will create larger markings, but you can still use it to create the beginnings of branches, which you can then elaborate on with your liner. And I actually think this is looking pretty good. Because it's wet, we have some semi-transparent markings, and it's looking like layered foliage. Some a little bit more distant than others. Oh, so I don't know if we've talked about this. Towards the bottom, we definitely talked about it in the sketching video, but in this one, towards the bottom, as you get towards the bottom of a tree that's like this, your branches will typically get a lot larger, a lot more full, and because of that, they will droop down rather than the ones at the top, which will kind of perk upwards. So just try to work on that transition from top to bottom. There are going to be exceptions to that rule, but it's a good general rule to consider. So I think we add a little bit of water to this mix, keep it alive. And then I also want trees over here going this way. So they'll kind of meet in the middle. like so. We can even make this brush damp, dry it, if you want more of those transparent markings. But if you have a lot of water like that, you can see that I actually lost the ability to make individual markings and it made the larger one. So do be careful. I'm using a lot more water than I typically would, just for the sake of showing you how it reacts. But I would use the idea that you want to make it wet, or not wet, you want to make it damp, not wet. Once it's wet, it's difficult to work with. When it's damp, it gives you a little bit more flexibility with the medium. And we can do just some little crisscross ones in the center here to show that there are other trees in behind with a very watery mix. It almost feels like painting with watercolor in this section right now. But I like that a lot. I think we switch on over to our liner to refine form. Yeah, already we're able to go back in and do a lot. Minute little protrusions, taking what were simple lines and complexifying them, creating little drop down branches within branches. Overlapping with other branches. We have a lot we can do. Okay, now we go Sap Green, Oxide Black, make a darker mix, but a very green heavy one. Like so. Back to the liner. And then we work on the center, the middle, the bodies of these to establish additional depth, right? Because the more values you have, the more depth you have, and the centers of these are going to receive a lot less light than the edges, and therefore they should be darker. These far edges will also be darker because they're off to the side. We have all the other branches in the way of the light. There we go. I love this. This is a lot of fun. And you can see this is where I'm doing a lot more of the actual detail work. We can also work this into these if we would like to. Need more crisscrossing for the sake of making it feel properly dimensional. So we'll probably bring this one out over here in multiple ways. We'll bring this one down. I have a lot of water right now, so I'm getting the semi-transparent markings, but that's okay. And we can reestablish some of these as well. Okay, we're doing great. Doing really, really well. It still looks a little awkward, to be honest, but we're making real progress. And I always talk about this, but acrylic paints are meant to look awkward for the first 85% of the journey, and it all comes together in that final 15%. So you kind of just have to trust yourself, trust the process. In the end, you will get to something you love. You just need to put in the time and believe in yourself. That said, this is a pretty good start. I think I want a little bit more of this darker mix in here, and I'm just going to create some little taps with this big brush, and then I'll move the paint out quickly with the liner. But it's just that the middle of the tree is probably going to be the darkest, because if the light's coming this way, then this is behind the tree and it'll have the least amount of light. So we'll have the strongest shadows, but there we go. Very good. See, already looks a lot better. And we don't even have the actual trees in here or the foliage in front of them, which is going to be a big, big step. That said, we can add some grass to the bottom, but I want to do the actual larger parts of the tree first. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the mix that we currently have. We're going to make a new mix with it. I'm going to grab a lot of our burnt, I believe this is a burnt sienna. It's definitely a burnt sienna. It's a little bit more red than a burnt umber. We're going to gray it down, so we'll add some titanium white, we'll add a little bit of oxide black. It has green in it, it has the red of the burnt sienna. Those two will actually nullify each other because they are complementary colors opposite to each other on the color wheel, and therefore they will take the saturation and bring it back down. But regardless, I want a variance. I want some areas to be a little more red, some to be a little bit more green, like a mossy green. And the idea now is that we take this, and we can do it with this brush, we can switch to a different brush, but regardless, we are going to start applying some larger trees, like so. I want to keep the brush damp. It's also worth noting, and this is big, this is important, I'm not doing one larger stretch. I'm doing lots of little tap and drags. That way the tree has little movements in it, and it'll look much, much more natural that way. Trees typically look very artificial if you just do one line. Now we're deviating from the reference photo as to where our trees are and the foliage they carry, but that's okay. We're just trying to create something that has a lot of lean subtly that way. There we go. Make that a little bit more damp. Continue working our way through here. We have a lot of open canvas that we're going to attempt to cover. However, if we don't cover all of this, that's okay. We can always do so with foliage a little bit later. Don't feel like you have to do extra large branches or trees to cover that up when there are going to be opportunities to do so anyway. So far so good. We can do the hints of trees in there. We can take this and even do some background trees with a very watery mix. That way it's semi-transparent and we have the greens showing through in the distance. But subtlety is the key through that. And then they can get a little bit bigger as we start to wrap around and get to this edge. Now maybe we do another one right through here. And that work its way back. The smaller your trees are in relation to other ones, the more scale you have. That'll make your medium-sized trees look a lot bigger, your smaller trees look a lot smaller. Variance, very important in these settings. And then we also have one over here, quite large. Notice that we're only doing about half of the canvas right now. We'll be doing the other half shortly, but as to not overwhelm ourselves or fight dry times, we're just kind of segmenting it a little bit. And it does make it easier. Always advise you to paint your trees smaller than you intend them to be, and then go back and make them wider. Throughout the process, it's much easier to make trees wider than it is to make them smaller. So, good start. Now, let's make a slightly darker mix, adding in extra Oxide Black, extra Ultramarine Blue. Now we're going to use this for the backs of the trees on the sides that are opposite to the light. So if the light's coming this way, then the right-hand side of these trees, in theory, and the bottom are going to be darker. So I'll work this onto the right-hand side. And then as we get up here, we also have light on this side. So light's coming this way, softer light is coming this way. So we'll move this more from the right-hand side into the center. just for this top area of this tree. There we go. Now for this one, because it has light coming this way, but then it also has soft light on both sides, again, towards the bottom, we're going to go on the right-hand side, and then we're going to slowly move that more into the center of the tree, right through there, doing lots of little taps rather than elongated markings. And then here it's pretty much just the right-hand side of the tree because we don't have a lot of light coming through the back or the left-hand side. But this is our first step into something three-dimensional. This is predominantly to the right. We have some soft light coming this way, but it's really not much. And then on this one, it really is towards the back. And right now we don't have any real texture, any real detail. We're just starting to develop base layers and understand how light is going to wrap around our subjects. So very simple, very, very simple. Now I think we grab our fan brush, try to make this pretty dry. So I'm just going to take it to my painting cloth right here, do my best to get the paint off, like so. As you can see, it still forks, so I'm just going to shift through the bristles until I get something that's nice and individualized. And then I'll grab some of the lighter brown that we had, and I'll start to tap that over portions of the darker application. That way we have a textural gradient now. It's okay if we lose a lot of the darker spots, we can always go back and reincorporate them. What's important is that we have something that looks staggered, as if we have little bits of bark that are protruding and catching light, but then they're also creating and casting shadow. Very good, very good. Very good. Okay. Now, I think we go with a brighter mix, but first, I'm going to have a little cup of coffee. Just keep that energy going. Love that, especially on these windy days. With that, again, more color onto the edges. So we grab some titanium white. Maybe we'll go over here. We'll grab some of that burnt sienna. We have light on these, so in theory we can even get playful. We could add a little bit of our yellow ochre into the mix, like so. That is a beautiful color. And then we can go back to this or our liner brush, and we can start applying it to the edges of the trees. It's really dependent on how comfortable you are with your brushes, because this one is certainly a lot harder, but neither is right or wrong, and I'm going to go with both. So little taps show that light is moving into our trees. There, I made it far too large. Light should not move that far into the back of it. That's okay though, I can always go back and fix it with some darker pigment. And we'll apply it up here. You can see them doing a slight drag, but for the most part it's just a tap. We're doing these taps predominantly towards the tops of the trees as well, because the bottoms will receive shadow. Shadow in abundance. It really stands out towards the bottom though, because it does get so dark. So it's alluring, but you have to be careful with it. Again, just getting things started with this. We also need to add foliage to these trees because we have foliage behind all of them, but we don't have foliage in front of them, and it only makes sense if there's also foliage in front of them. Very good. So now I think we make sure that brush is nice and damp. We'll just get more of this paint wet on our palette. If you want, you can make it brighter or yellow. You can adjust it in whichever direction you like before reapproaching with the liner. But it is time to reapproach with the liner. And here I'm going to take my pinky finger, ground it against the edge of the canvas. This is going to help us remove shake. And then, as you can see, I'm just working my way down. Lots of little taps and drags. Nothing dramatic. Very good. Okay. I think we brighten this up a bit more because it's in the center. As we get towards the top, we stop brightening it though because there's more foliage up there, which is creating shadow. You can see that this is a very subtle process. I'm not doing a whole lot, but all of the details, they add up, right? Eventually we end up with a beautiful painting. Just want to make sure that the edges aren't the darker hue that you have in the very light areas. There we go. We can even add a little bit of this light into these distant trees. Not too much. You can also create new branches. Make what you have more subtle. It's all coming together. Okay. I think we're doing pretty good. Talk about how it's going to look awkward for the first 85%, but you know, it's not looking too awkward yet. I think we're quickly moving out of that. It looks rather incomplete because it is, but we are finding our way. Oh, this is a good textured tree. Looks nice and organic. Can add some little taps back here. Typically texture is the answer of scenes like this. And you don't need more subjects, you just need to add texture to the subjects you have. Sometimes you need both. In our case, here, today, I do think we need both, but do look to texture before you look to adding an additional tree or subject. Okay. Going back and forth between the highlights and the shadows, quite happily. Maybe we mix the mid value and the highlight value, like this. We render some distant trees back here in between some of our foliage. So I'm just intentionally dodging all of the pre-established greenery. And you know why we can do this? Because we did our texture first. Then we asked ourselves, okay, do we need more trees? Do we want more subjects? The answer is yes. But I wouldn't have done this until we established those textures. And because this is so distant, because it has so much light on it, it likely won't have texture to it. The farther away a subject is, the less detail you see, and that's okay. But it is good to have a variety of these trees and these values. There we go. Can do little branches coming off of the trees if you would like to. Different kinds of trees require different kinds of branches. Variance is a beautiful thing. There we go. Okay, so from here, took a little bit of a break. Everything is nice and dry, and that means we can go in and we can apply a brand new layer without having to worry about just moving around paint and making messy, muddy areas. That said, we have these beautiful trees, we have texture, but it's time to add some foliage on top of them. Because right now we have a lot of foliage behind them, and realistically that foliage will protrude in all directions, right? And with that, because we are getting closer to us, because we're getting more of the innate palettes, we're getting less atmospheric light, we're going to go with more Oxide Black, we're going to go with more Sap Green, we'll go with a little bit more of our Ultramarine Blue, but this is predominantly going to be Sap Green, Oxide Black. We can have a little bit of titanium white in there to gray it down, brighten it up. But I think that right there is a really good mix. Now, again, you can go in with the liner if you want it to be very pristine, but I think I want something a little bit more organic. So I'm going to go with the fan brush. It's just a little bit damp. And we are going to apply some foliage. And before I make the markings, I'm just going to play a little bit, figure out where exactly I want these. I think here is a good spot. Yeah, oh, I love that. Okay, so our goal was to create an extra layer of depth to put foliage in front of these foreground trees. And I think we have already accomplished all of it. You can see I'm just using little portions of this brush to begin with. I'm not pressing the entirety of the brush into the canvas. We're being selective, we're moving back left and right from this tree. We can do so over here as well. And we don't have to worry about doing too much detail because we can always go back in with a liner and further instigate that. But this is making it look much more real. I think when we have this very detailed background, sometimes we have fear of going in and doing applications like this because we don't want to ruin all of our hard work. But realistically, when you look at a forest, you just see so much detail, so much layering of foliage, and to make that look as it is in real life, you do need to cover up past layers, and that's okay. A lot of painting is about building confidence in yourself, in your vision, and that which is yet to be rendered, and this is a great opportunity to do exactly that. Exactly that. Okay. Now, I think we move down in the tree just a little bit more. Our branches are going to get a bit smaller towards the very bottom, but around here they're the largest, and then again, of course, they get smaller towards the top. We're just finding the right transitions and the right balance for all of it. There we go. Now we'll make sure we have enough paint before putting this back into the water, picking up our liner, solidifying our favorite markings, and building them out in the ways that feel right. And this is something you can go back to many times throughout your painting process. You can start on the other side of the canvas and then work your way back here. You can go and cover up portions of this later on should you want to. And that's really the beauty of acrylics, right? The quick dry means that you can go back and rework with ease when you feel inspired to do so. By the way, I hope you're enjoying the longer lesson. I know it's been a little while since we did one of these. It is fun to put all this detail in here. Do you still intend on doing more colorful fall lessons? I really do want to try the quicker sketching videos though too. They might not be for traceables for the actual videos that we do on here. They might just be unique landscapes that we can learn to draw together. But we'll see what we end up doing. We do a lot of drawings up over on Patreon because I sketch out all of the traceables and record those videos. Might make it a little bit different than those. But I will still be doing those up over on Patreon for those of you who are supporting the channel directly. And as always, big thank you to those of you who are up over there supporting the channel. Really wouldn't be able to do these videos long or short if it wasn't for you. And I really appreciate just how you've kept the channel alive and growing over all these years. Started doing this almost, I guess over a decade ago now. And I know that some of you have been up there for the entirety of that decade. And that support is kind of astounding to me. So thank you for sticking by. Thank you for the belief in what we're doing. Thank you for keeping traditional medium and artwork alive. Thank you for all of it. There we go. Okay. We can also take some of this, despite the fact that it's green, and create some little trees down here. This will blend in really nicely with the background and therefore just feel cohesive. We're just creating more line work, essentially. Very good. Very, very good. Now I think we'll take a little bit of a break from all of the greenery that we have and work on our pathway towards the bottom, because, well, we could just go over here and do more greenery. I think it's sometimes important to take those mental breaks to live with this so that we can kind of digest the ideas, the applications, and then potentially improve upon them in a little bit of time. But with that, we are going to begin down here. And as you can see, there's a couple light areas right through here and here. The midsection is a little bit darker. The edges are a little bit darker, and then it gets really dark to the edge of those areas. Now the background is going to have the most light because we're closer to the light, and that means we have a lot of titanium white. We have a good amount of our burnt sienna, maybe a hint of our yellow ochre. Warm it up. Yellow ochre is quite nice in these mixes because it can turn into a green when next mixed with an oxide black. So it's fairly flexible. But let's start with something that doesn't have too much color in it. Something a little more subtle. And let's move this right down our pathways to start things off. Very good. We're going to do a lot of layering and tapping, so don't worry too much about your application or your edges at this point. We're just getting paint on the canvas. And then towards the middle and the sides, remember it needs to be darker, so we'll add some extra burnt sienna, a little bit of Oxide Black. We'll mix those all together. Maybe a hint again of our yellow ochre. Ooh, that actually is really nice. As you move up back here, you can see how it blends, and we have that very natural transition. It's exactly what we want. We'll apply that to the other side, and we'll apply that right on this side as well. Now, as you move up towards the back, we let it blend, but we'll do so with little taps with the brush, moving the darker areas into the lighter areas into the darker. You can just do a little bit more light pigment towards the bottom, like so. And then, as we talked about, we create that nice little transition from one into the other. That way we don't have the rounded line work. We have horizontal line work. And this is rather easy. You just need to approach it while it's wet for the most part. We're going to have a lot of extra techniques which make this look actually detailed and realistic. But as far as just getting started goes, this is a really good technique to get your foundation and your understanding of it going. This isn't what it's meant to look like in the end, it's just a step, a foundational element. It's important to be mindful of those in the painting process. Okay. This looks great. Really, really happy so far. Now, how do we make this more interesting? How do we add more depth? Simply, we add some Oxide Black, maybe a little bit of our Ultramarine Blue, burnt sienna, and we'll apply this towards the very edge. It's okay if the middle part has started to dry a little bit, because this is a bit of a starker transition. You can see I'm just starting it at the halfway point because we won't have these dark values that far off. There we go. I'm going to create a bit of a soft line towards the top, that way it's easier to blend with later. But now I'm just going to go back with the corner of this brush and do the same thing that I did before, which is the soft blends left and right. Just through a little tap. And again, if this completely dries, you can just make your brush a little bit more damp. Work that back in. Head on over to the other side, do the same thing. There we go. You can even take a little bit of it, work it right into the middle. Just a little bit though. Oh, I like that. Okay, we're doing a great job. Now, I think we put that brush down. We probably pick up our fan brush. Grab a bit more. Taps towards the center, taps out in here. Now we're creating smaller markings than our larger flat-headed brush could. We're just moving around a lot of the pigment that we had. The idea is a lot of these darker taps are pieces of dirt or road or rock that protrude, and then the light isn't quite getting to the back of them. So it's a bit more shadow heavy. And as we start to run out of pigment, we can move towards the back because it's a less stark application. If it gets a little too dark in this process, don't worry about it, because we will be going back over this with the lighter movements, lighter textures, lighter taps as well. But it is a good start. There we go. Now, again, for said lighter aesthetics, burnt sienna, titanium white. We can keep it more red like this if we want, or we add a little bit of yellow, could mix it into the black. Really isn't a right or wrong, just depending on how you want the look to be. I think this is quite nice. So now we're doing what we did with the darker pigments with the lighter pigments. If there are any areas you made too dark by accident, this is a great time to just go over them, get some extra pigment, rebuild those highlights. I'm particularly doing a lot more down here. Want more in the middle as well. It's also worth noting if you want a really particular spot, the liner brush is great for this. It's just that the fan brush can do so much so quickly, it's hard not to start with this one. There we go. Ooh, that looks quite natural. Love that. It's a nice subtle highlight as well, not too saturated. Perfect for a more subdued, moody day. But that right there is a great start to our ground. I think we should probably put some leaves and such on it, but for now, it's looking really good. So the darker values here in the road don't quite match what we have there. So we are just going to take that large flathead brush, reapproach our darker greens, a lot of sap green, oxide black, hint of titanium white, just a hint. Go back to the old flat-headed brush. At this point it should be dry, so we'll peel back those bristles. Very nice. We'll grab some of that dark pigment. We can even do a stroke now towards the foreground. That's reminiscent of grass. So it's these elongated movements upwards, and then they turn into taps as you get farther away. We can go back and add highlights to these a little bit later, and that'll be really nice. But we do need to start integrating the grass into the road, so occasionally we're dragging it out there. There we go. Put that in water, grab the liner. You can see a lot of our techniques are bouncing back and forth between brushes. It's because one brush is good for one part of the process, and then you want another brush for another part. But it's rarely ever that an individual brush does everything. It can do enough that it looks decent. You can get the idea across, but if you want to really double down on your details, make it look real, you'll probably bounce between brushes. So now we're just adding a little bit of grass out into the middle. Not too much. Get smaller as you move into the distance. But I think for now, that's a really good amount. Okay, so while we do want to add some highlights down here, and while we will get to that, I actually want to head over on this side and start working on the trees that we have there, and then work our way towards the left. So this is going to be a fun experience in that we are going to cover the remainder of our white canvas always feel like we're completing something there. Though, again, these first tree branches are going to be a bit farther back. They're going to be a bit brighter. So we are starting with some titanium white in the mix, some sap green, just like so. Want it to be a little bit more muted, and I want a decent amount of it. Now we could, as you've seen many a time before, go in with our liner brush and just work our branches out like this, and that is an entirely viable strategy. And I think that's actually what I'm going to do for the first couple. And then when we make our mix a little bit darker, I'll switch over into something that's a bit quicker, larger. Then we'll refine with this one after. But we do just want to get some pigment going on the canvas. Get some leading lines in. You can see that all of these branches are really pointing the eye towards the center, which is a big part of the goal. All of these branches are behind this tree, so I'm trying to be mindful of that. Painting it on both sides. There we go. So far, so good. Really, really like that easy start. Gets us comfortable. Now we can go into a more green dominant mix. Grabbing hints of the Oxide Black that are still live on the palette. And for this, we are switching, as you would assume, to our fan brush. So now we'll do a similar application. Similar trees, similar branches. Like that. And this is just getting us started. Going to be careful around here. Go to the other side. Good beginnings. And this will really show up on the other side because it'll be over a darker space, which is nice. We can also always go back and touch up this tree should we need to. So don't worry too much about getting paint over that area. Now once we have our base in, I'll switch back to the liner. We'll switch back to meticulous markings. There we go. Lots of openings in our greenery. And at this point, we've had a lot of practice with trees like this, so it should feel relatively comfy. Recovering some of the past branches that we did, that's okay. We're just creating more depth and layers. Very good, very good. And now I think we go with a slightly darker mix. Oxide Black, Sap Green. Very good. Progressively working in this direction. Build out the darker areas of that new foliage, the spines of our branches. And just build it out. It can get brighter as we move closer to the light, so you don't have to continuously grab more dark pigment to complete the branch. You can just kind of let the pigment run out naturally. we go. There we go. Not quite done this just yet, but making good progress. Curious what you are painting, what you're working on in the background. Is there something that you've been working on for a while? Is there something you've been sketching and you're excited to start painting? I feel like a lot of us typically have a lot of projects on the go at the same time. Definitely one of those people where while I wait for some ideas to brew, I dive into other paintings, just keep those skills sharp, and just stay productive. Stay having fun with the creative process while, again, those ideas do become something a little more tangible. There we go. So far, so good. I think our next step will be a really fun one. That will take a lot of this pigment and we'll start working it back with that larger flat-headed brush. I'm going to work around my coffee cup, which is a very necessary part of the setup, and I definitely can't move. No, no, no. Mandatory inclusion. So we'll just be intentional and wise with these markings. We have a really nice big tree right through here, which we'll cut across. We haven't addressed that yet, but it will cover a lot of this greenery. Probably do a pretty lovely job in the process of doing so. Now we're starting to build out this visually more flat area, admittedly, but we'll add some detail, some textures and whatnot into here as well. So nothing to be worried about. There we are. Now, as we move over here, we do need to progressively make this darker because we're moving farther and farther away from the light. So more Oxide Black, more Sap Green. We'll apply that right down here as a base. Give it a nice vignette look. And then we'll work it up into our previously applied greens. Like so. Have a pretty good transition. It's a little soft. We definitely want it to be textured instead, but it's a good start. There. Have this towards the bottom. Have lots of little grass through there. And this bottom area will be darker because this area has a light working through it while the bottom has shadows working on top of it. There we go. Inching closer and closer. I think we'll go with a bit of a darker top here as well, just a little more Oxide Black in the green mix. Then we can grab our liner brush, grab the same pigment, and then start working some branches in that same way that we've been applying them. So our patterns remain similar. And if we do this while it's all wet, we can get these really soft looking layered branches which just glide on the canvas. There we go. Trying to create different sizes, different shapes. They're all acting as leading lines though and bringing the viewer and the eye inwards, which is always the goal. Work these down. Definitely need to break this up a little bit. Now that it's little protrusions. Same goes for this one. Lots of these bell shapes, but kind of working its way back up. Not something you want through the entirety of the piece, but definitely adds some life to it. Okay, as you move down here, we are going to need more, but they are going to have more of a swing down because, again, they're getting larger. These are the bottoms of trees. They're full of heavy foliage. Very good. So far, I think we have something pretty great coming together. I want to be careful not to overdo this. But we can have a couple little branches that really stick out here and there. We're just layering on those values. Just like that. To the bottom, it's more just downward strokes, like so. Overlapping. Big ones, little ones, you want that variety for scale's sake. And then we still need to go back over here and deliver a whole lot more. Though it is starting to dry, so I'm going to make my brush progressively more damp to keep that paint wet and alive, but also just to condense my bristles and make those smaller, sharper markings, despite the fact that that area is in fact drying out. And you can see I'm also going back up to the top and fixing other branches. Not all of them, but here and there. And we want a lot of grass through here, but I don't want to do that until we have this tree worked in, because this tree is pretty pivotal to our layering in front of the grass. There we are. Again, we make the tree smaller initially, that way we can make it bigger in the long term and have it really work. Might also just do a little bit of grass over here. Now that I have that wet paint, that dark pigment. So we're just bouncing around. Okay, so from here, we are going to take a break from all of that greenery to work on the final part of open space on the canvas. For that, we are just going to take some of our burnt sienna, our oxide black, titanium white, make that nice grayish brown as our base, and we are going to work that on here as a flat, simple color. You can see that I'm doing this through multiple strokes, as we did with all of our other trees. This does not change when it is a larger tree. We remain consistent, and I think we'll just switch hands, that way you can see a little bit better as I get a nice sharp edge here. Not fully ambidextrous, but enough that we can do this. And you obviously do not have to switch hands. This is really just for the sake of the camera. I am trying my best to ensure that you can see throughout the entirety of the process. I apologize when I'm not perfect at it, but I do appreciate the patience. Some lessons are much better than others with that. But I think this is a good start to the tree. Maybe we create some little root systems down here to the bottom. I don't see it in the reference photo, but I think it could be nice. Maybe we have a little bit of it popping up and then back down there. Give it some extra character. Towards the backhand side, not going to have a lot of light. Light's going this way. So for that, I think we grab some of our Ultramarine Blue, Oxide Black, burnt Sienna, more Ultramarine Blue, hint of titanium white, and now we work this towards the back. As you can see, we have a little bit of a blend going on. That's okay. We started at the bottom, worked our way towards the top. That way, as it blended towards the top, it got less and less dramatic because the top will get more light than the bottom. And I'm just using the corner of the brush to move this out and create some of that initial textural detail. That way we don't have any straight, clean lines. So far, so good. Again, this is a technique that is great to get your foundation on there. You're probably going to want to use a different brush for the real details, but it's a good way to start. We're also going to want to make this quite a bit darker, but this is a strong beginning. We'll also add some highlight towards the top of this tree by grabbing some extra titanium white, a little bit of our yellow ochre, mixing that with our previous mid value, and then we'll just tap that along towards the top. And I do mean tap, not making any strokes. Have it come down slightly here and there. Maybe I do it just a hint of it over on this side of the top. Make such nice sharp markings there. Then we can put that brush down, pick up our liner, and then tap in some minute markings. Because the tree is closer to us than any of our other trees, we'll see more detail in this one than any other. So while I liked using the fan brush for a lot of the bark and texture in the past trees, here you actually can use the liner and do a pretty good job because the bark will be close enough to us that it will look big enough that this will make sense as an application style. We'll have it dissipate as you move towards the back of the tree. And then you can also let it dissipate as you move towards the bottom, because the bottom will not have as much light, and this in theory will get a little bit darker. There we go. We can also mix it into more of the mid value and the darker value, and use this mix through here for the bottom area, and maybe even the back of the tree just a little bit, because hints of light will wrap around and it will connect with protruding portions on both sides. So we're just going to try to stay mindful of that and execute to the best of our ability. Lots of additional highlights, some additional highlights. I think that is actually really, really nice. Can grab some of these, work them over here. Just make sure that the painting's cohesive, that your colors do work from both sides. Good addition. You can see I'm using my pinky finger to ground my hand on the water dish. Really anything will work. I'm just trying to remove shake. I always advocate for eating while you paint. That way you take the shake out of your hand and drinking lots of water. But admittedly, I've just been drinking a lot of coffee. So I should probably fix that. But I also don't really want to put down the brush. I'm also just really enjoying the process. Though this is your friendly reminder to stay healthy through the painting process, you will probably paint better if you do. It is likely. Again, lots of little implied branches and whatnot throughout the distance. There we are. Okay, from here we have a lot of different things we can do. We can start taking some of our darker or mid-value mixes like this, and we can start implementing additional branches that come out from the top there. We can, one second, I just want to do a little bit more. Yeah, okay, we'll do a lot more up there, but we can start doing that. We can build out larger branches in here. We can build out additional trees. I think the additional trees make the most sense while we have all of our pigment ready to go. I'll go for more of a mid to dark value burnt sienna mix. We'll go right through here. Ooh, it's getting nice and windy again. I like that. So atmospheric. Hope you can hear it. I think we'll also maybe create another tree through here that kind of weaves in between some of our foliage. Gets a little smaller towards the top, as it should. Maybe we have another one. Again, the variety of sizing is going to do a lot of good for your painting as a whole. Just some little ones in the background there, and maybe one that kind of leans off the view, but connects to this. That way it's a singular tree and it's a little more unique than what we've painted before. Then we can make a darker mix, a little bit more of our ultramarine blue, keep it cool. Work that on the side that isn't receiving light in the middle. Getting a slight blend with our past mix because it's all wet into wet right now. Then a little tap with the brush to bring them together. Good starts. Good starts. Okay, now maybe a brighter variant of all of this. A little more titanium white, a little more burnt sienna. Doesn't need to be a lot brighter because the areas in which we're in right now are pretty dark to begin with. There we go. That's looking good. Now with the liner, we'll just bounce back and forth between the highlights and the shadows. Create a little bit of that texture. But we might want to switch back to the fan brush for this, because this isn't as close, it isn't as detailed as what we have there. I believe we have our fan brush ready to go, pretty accessible. I just need a darker mix again. And that should do it. So, some nice little taps. Towards the top and the bottom. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. A couple more little highlights. Also nice and pretty. You can even do some little taps in the background to imply additional trees. It doesn't ever have to be too dramatic. There. Now maybe we take the liner, some of that slightly darker but not too dark mix. And we create bonus branches that find their way out. And these little ones are how you build on the realism in a much more dramatic way. Remember that they do need to crisscross here and there. And then it'll all feel like it's coming together. See, I'm getting much more playful with my branches. This wasn't in the reference photo, it just kind of felt right for the painting. Kind of have it going this way. Yeah. Let's have it take a more dramatic turn for the sake of having it intertwine and interweave with the other branches. And then we make the bottom bigger. Always start with a smaller base though, as we've talked about. Then we'll make the edges a little bit brighter. Grab our past brighter mix, work that onto the side that is receiving the light. Bouncing between a lot of areas and techniques, building a more interesting painting in the process. Could even take a little bit of this highlight, and I mean just a little bit, and speckle that onto some of these distant trees. Though these areas are still very much void of leaves, so we still need to incorporate those. It is coming together though. It is looking pretty nice. Okay, so now that we have the base of the tree in line, I actually want to start doing some details in the grass. And that means starting with our sap green, a little bit of titanium white, a little bit of oxide black, a little bit of, here, for some variants, yellow ochre. That'll just add some warmth, but when mixed with the oxide black, again, it gets pretty interesting. Then we can go to either our fan brush or our old flat-headed brush. I'm going to opt for the fan brush here. But with this, I'm going to just start along the edges, working in little tufts of grass. Small highlights, they'll get bigger as we get closer to us in the painting. And the idea is that we're just creating as small markings as we possibly can, and then they get lost as you move into the distance, like so. So more space in between your tufts towards the foreground and longer strokes, and then closer taps towards the background. Here, we'll do the same, but I do need more pigment. So green, yellow ochre, titanium white, that's a good color. This is a dry fan brush, by the way, fully dry. You do want that for this part of it. Otherwise, you won't get those really sharp markings for the grass that you want. You can see how we're going back, adding more here and there. But then as we start to roll around the edge here, we'll have a little bit of light coming through the other side. So we can continue this color, but after a certain point, we're going to let this diminish towards the top. We're going to switch our color to be a little bit darker because back here we'll have more shadows. So more oxide black this time, though we still have our titanium white, our cad yellow, our sap green. It's just a little bit less prominent. And this we can continue with. Now eventually your brush might have too much pigment on it, at which point it won't create enough little markings. And at that point, you probably want to clean your brush fully, dry it fully, and then come back. But I might be able to make this work. Wish us luck. So far, all seems well. There we go. Okay, so we are back. Brand new day, brand new coffee, though, as you can see, that is quickly coming to its end. I'm really looking forward to getting back into this because everything is nice and dry. It means we can go in, add some moss, add some different colored grass, some individual strands of grass, maybe a couple little rocks, and we are going to follify this to a greater degree, add some colors in the Patreon version as well. But we still have quite a few things to do to continue to finish the more somber version, so I am excited to do that. I'm going to, again, drink a little bit of this coffee, then we'll jump back into it. I love it. Okay, so mixing, as per usual, done with the larger flat-headed brush that we are staying consistent on, making sure it is nice and damp. And the next step is either adding larger grass or moss. And I think we can probably use a similar mix, and that'll tie the bottom half of the painting into the more tall areas. So we'll grab some of our yellow ochre. All of this is fully dry, so I'm not worried about it mixing. You, in theory, could work on a clean spot in your palette. We're going to make a yellowish green. I like that, nice and warm, good for fall. Add some titanium white, though we do not need it to be that bright, so a little bit of Oxide Black in there too. I might also now double down on the yellow just because we've desaturated it quite a bit. And then we'll switch on over to the liner brush, make sure that's nice and damp, that way the bristles do condense. Grab some of the pigment, and then we can, in theory, create some elongated markings. There we go. And I'm just going to throw these in a lot of different areas throughout, crisscrossing, just trying to diversify our palette in the ground. And we can apply this over here as well. We don't want the color in just one area of the painting, we want it in all of them. That way it moves the eye around and it feels natural. You can see that we don't need to add a lot before it starts to be felt. Trying to use a decent amount of water on my brush so that my markings are very smooth and sharp, but not so much that it creates the little dollops of water. Which happens, and it will happen, and that's okay. We're just looking to create the most consistent, sharp little applications that we can. So far so good. I think my paint might be starting to dry just because I didn't add a lot of water to it initially. If that is the case though, that is a-okay. We can always just go back in and remix more. Let's throw a bit of color into the center. Doesn't have to be too much. And now, again, because it is drying, let's remix. I think I might add a little bit more green into this one. And we'll just continue changing the color minorly. There we go. This time you can see the mix itself is much bigger. I find that when I start painting, often I do smaller mixes just for the sake of testing, getting things ready, and then as I'm happy with the color, I double down and I mix more. And I think that's just something that happens when you start painting in the day. Again, we're fairly far into this painting, but this is me just getting into it right now. Woke up feeling pretty fresh, feeling ready to make a painting we can all love. Good feelings. There we go. doing the little things. I know you're a little bit farther away, camera-wise, from what we're doing, but that's intentional right now because I don't want you too close. I want you to see how the details work holistically rather than if you were hyper-focusing on an area, because this is one of those subjects where you really could hyper-focus and you could make it look great, but then won't fit with the rest of the image. So it's better to stay farther away, and I'm actually trying to keep my head very far away from the canvas as I paint this grass so that I do keep that wider perspective. That said, once I have some good grass out here, and I think we have some good grass, we might take this mix, this brush, we can work it into the mid values and the highlights of this tree, like so. A little bit in here, because we will have moss. It will be ascending upwards. For the most part towards the bottoms, but I already love this. One of those techniques that's so easy, but it adds so much to a painting. Colors are cohesive with the rest of what we have. We can even create some distant tree trunks with more vertical markings on this. Just the implication of trees in the background, as you can see. Then we can take that liner brush and we can tap on additional little areas. Doesn't need to be dramatic. Just little bits. There we go. Like this. Lots of moss. When I was growing up, we had a forest right behind the house, and there was a lot of trees. There was a little swamp, and therefore there was a lot of moss. And because of that, I feel like I have a real affinity for this subject and painting it. It just kind of brings me back. I think that's where I get a lot of love for art, landscapes, and painting. It resides in nostalgia. Grew up around a lot of this, and it just lets you live in those great memories, you know? I was really, really lucky in that. Mom and Dad loved going for walks, and it means when I was a kid we were exploring quarries and little caves and going camping, doing all that good stuff. And as I think a lot of you know, just from the starts of these videos, live in the city now. Moved pretty far away from a lot of that, but still love it, still feels special. And we continue to honor it in the art that we make, you know? Now I'm going in with a more yellow bright mix. With a liner brush, I'm just tapping on little protrusions, areas that can catch more light, that can bring more life to the moss on the trees here. I'm not covering up all of the green that we applied, but we are going into a good bit of it. Trying to keep it pretty staggered. In the distance, we don't want a lot of detail, just a hint. Similar rules apply to the highlights that we applied back there earlier. There we are. We can work this up towards the top, just little bits. Again, we want to move the greens all the way throughout the painting. They don't just exist at the bottom in the grass. Certain greens don't just exist towards the top. It was nice. It was really nice. You can see how the light really wraps around this larger tree. That's the big goal, making it three-dimensional through the changing values. That said, I think we have a good amount of this, and I would like to work on the grass a bit more. Before we were doing so at a distance because we were just trying to get everything balanced. But now I think we can get just a little bit closer. So I'll do that and we'll work on some additional highlights together. Okay, so yet again, we are nice and close. We are going to build up more of the mixture that we had, and I don't really want to change it much from the highlight of the moss. I'm just making it a bit more wet, that way it's malleable and we can get some nice clean sharp strokes. Here, I'm going to apply more highlight to the grass towards the back because that's where the light really is going to come from. So that'll be here, that'll be here, and then we'll stagger it downwards. We'll just let the paint naturally run out as we get closer to us, and that should create a gradient of highlight that just works out and away. So far so good there. Now we'll do a bit more through here. Very good. And you can see that I'm trying to be careful in that I'm not moving it behind this tree, because right here in theory would have a soft shadow. It's not dramatic, it's not hard, but in theory there is a shadow there. So we'll have light going through this side, we'll have light coming this way, but we won't have light through there. In theory. We'll try our best. And if we accidentally make it a little too bright, that's okay too, because we can always just go back and darken it. It's all about creating this larger gradient of light. There we go. Definitely working well. Little bits of grass in the foreground. This area along the edge will also catch a good bit of light when there isn't dramatic shadow. So we can just do that along the edge and then work it back here and have it slowly stagger and get darker. There we go. That connects to the trees nicely. Good job. We're getting there. Okay, so once that's done, I think it's time to just add a little bit more light around here. Individual strands, not much, but just something to value-wise match the highlights that we have on this tree. Or closer so that the strands can be longer. But I'm not doing too much of it because these are pretty bright, they're pretty big, and we don't want it to become too distracting as a whole. I think that is a happy medium. So, with it looking pretty good there, still have quite a few steps. I think one thing I really like to do is make this a little bit brighter. We don't need a lot of paint for that. We'll just grab some titanium white, hint of our burnt sienna. Create a brighter mix than which we've had. There we go. Again, very minimal paint. Just enough to give it that sparkle, that sheen in the background. And now I think we move back up to our trees because we still have quite a bit to do up there. So I'm going to zoom you out. We will continue having fun. Okay, so now we can see the top of the painting again. And I would like to continue working on some of these branches. So, you know what, I say that. Let's do some foliage first. I really like this color. I'd like to work it up into the top, and I don't want to let go of it right now. We can paint the branches around some of the foliage. We can paint more foliage on top of those branches. So I think our layering will be fine. It'd be a little more intuitive to do the branches first before all of the highlighted foliage, but I think we can accomplish something really nice here right now. So I'm going to make this a little bit more green than it was, just a little bit. We are going to take our liner brush initially, and we're going to place some highlighted foliage. Now this is going to be close to us, so we're going to see the entirety of leaves. So as you can see, I'm tapping on larger markings. I'm applying a bit more pressure with my brush, like so. Having it off to the edge, it can move on out here. In fact, you know what? In the reference photo, I can see that it actually moves over a lot of the tree. So let's do that. Let's move it over the tree. Let's take another one. We can create the top of it to be a little bit winding. And then the foliage that comes out. A little bit poking out of the top, but most of it hanging down. And this just shows additional layers of depth. We want to make sure that these two don't end at the same point, so one of them needs to be significantly longer than the other. And I think this one makes more sense because we have all this darker foliage out here that it can stand out behind and have a nice impact, have a good visual standing. So we like that. Maybe a little bit that does go behind the tree. That could be interesting. A little bit that came up. Oh yeah. It just adds so much depth to the painting. This is something I did see in the reference photo and I've been really excited about integrating. You can create little stems, connective tissue. Double down on the areas that we like. There's some back here behind the tree. These can get more light in theory. This area is pretty open. So prime space for brighter markings. Love that. Okay, a little bit back here, a little bit back here. Again, this is behind this tree, so it needs to have another portion. And I'm letting it get more and more watery as we move back, that way it's more semi-transparent and it dries darker. And that makes sense because it's more in the shadows, so it should be darker. It's one of those processes that took almost zero time to put together, but had such an impact on the painting. Maybe a little bit that goes in front of these trees. Trying to create a good number of these branches that just fill out the space. We will continue to fill out the space. There we go. Okay. Now maybe we take a bit more of this. We can have it kind of coming up there. There. Just little taps throughout in the negative space. Especially when it's watery. Just looks like there are other plants that have highlight within here. Don't want to do too much of it, but I think an amount like that feels good. Okay. Now, I might take a little bit more of this, brighten up some of the grass here, just because it will receive a lot of light. And we have a lot of light over on this side of the canvas. I want to re-interject some on the other side, just so the eye bounces in a natural way. That feels good. Okay. We can also add some of this up here towards the top. Looked incredibly bright in all of the shadows, but up here it's actually a little darker because the sky is so bright. So it's all about what's next to the subject, right? There we go. Just hints of that greenery. We can always go back and add more. So we start subtle. We can also go in and add branches and such, as you know. Now we kind of have this canopying effect, which I always love. Good. Good, good, good. From here, I think maybe we do have some fun with some additional branches. Or you know what? Let's go slightly brighter. Let's just add a little bit of depth to these. A little more titanium white, a little more of our yellow. Add some highlight to the ends of these that are closer to the light. You want to be careful not to overdo it, but I think this will be good variance. Variance is key. That's nice. Okay, so maybe we do slightly more up here. Now you can see we're bouncing colors around to keep it cohesive. I like that. A little bit more through here maybe. Just a touch. That was good. More of that gradient. And while this is very bright, it won't look too bright because right back here we have that titanium white with a burnt sienna, and it's comparatively incredibly bright. There. Yeah, it makes that shadow look more dramatic. Good job, good job. We're figuring it out. going to sharpen these just a hint. Also nice. Also nice. All right. All right, all right, all right. Let's go with more branches yet again. So we're going to clean this brush relatively well. Good. Grab some of our burnt sienna, titanium white, a little bit of our oxide black, a little bit of our yellow ochre. Beautiful color for our branches. And then we'll just kind of create some little ones up here. The fact that this pigment is brighter than our previous branches makes it look like light is working through it. So it makes sense within the context of the top of our trees. Though we can go with a darker mix as well. That way we have more shadows in the center of it. Nice. Back to the highlight. Really working on that canopying effect, which isn't something I initially thought I was going to put a lot of time and effort into, or even develop that dramatically, but as paintings develop, we develop with them, and we make those changes based off how we think we can best achieve the best painting. Right now, I think it's more up here, like that. Yeah, subtle addition, but it's a nice one. Just adding some different kinds of foliage, slightly different color. There we go. I think we can also create some additional openings in the trees. We will need a very clean brush. You might want to clean your water. You might want to grab a new brush for this. But if you feel like you can get it nice and clear, then we can just proceed to grab some titanium white, hint of our ultramarine blue, mix up that nice bluish white that we had in the sky initially. Grab our liner, and then we can re-interject little openings in our trees back here. But this is a really easy way of creating additional depth in your painting. I'll often go back and do this towards the very end, just to make sure everything looks great. And I think it's helping a lot. Often it does. I really like how this one's turning out. As per usual, again, I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody who's supporting the channel up over on Patreon for making lessons like this happen. If you are new to the channel and this is your first video, I'd like to let you know that up over on Patreon, which you can find in the link in the description, you can get access to the traceable, so the original drawing that you saw on here, You can get access to the drawing video where I actually sketch it out and walk you through the compositional elements, why we're doing what we are. It's an easy way of getting acquainted with the painting before we actually jump into the painting. You can also get access to the color analysis video where I take the reference photo, we bring it into Photoshop, and then we break down all of the colors in it and decide what our palette is actually going to look like. I know when I started painting, that was something that I found rather tricky, just looking at a reference photo and figuring out, okay, do I use a phthalo blue here, or do I use an ultramarine blue, or do I go with a cerulean? Those kinds of questions. That's what we tackle in those. And you can also get hundreds of bonus lessons up there that aren't here on Patreon. You can get ad-free versions of the videos. You can get your name in the credits of these videos as a producer. Big, 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 extremely big thank you to all of you who donate and pledge to that tier. That always means so much, that you care about the channel, that you want to support it, that you want to see your name in the videos. I've subscribed to a couple Patreons in the past to have that and have my name at the end of their videos, and I always just, I know if I were applying at that tier, it meant that I really, really liked and cared about the content, and it meant a lot to me. So it means a lot to me when I see that you guys do that as well. So thank you for supporting the channel in such a big way. There we go. You can see that we had a lot of these little guys throughout. Love painting these landscapes. Still have quite a few fall ones. I know for those of you in America, you are currently heading up to Thanksgiving in the calendar, and that's exciting. Good food, hopefully some time with friends or family. Always try to do a Friendsgiving up here in Toronto. Just an excuse to feel some warm feelings, you know? Talked a lot about nostalgia earlier in this painting, and painting for the sake of nostalgia, bringing you back to those memories. I feel like those are times and those are settings that are great for making those new memories while honoring the old. There we go. Okay. And I think that right there is a lovely, moody fall scene. I was really looking forward to this one, because I felt like we had painted a lot with our oranges and our yellows and our fall colors, and I wanted to do something a little bit more subdued. And I think we did a great job of that. Though I am going to immediately contradict myself, and I'm going to add some real fall colors into this. I'm going to make that a bonus lesson up over on Patreon for those of you who are supporting up there, and I'll show you what it looks like here as well when it's done. But yeah, this was a pleasure. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you feel inspired to go out and create your own painting. I hope that you feel just that motivation. I hope you feel like you learned something. This was a real pleasure, and I will see you soon with another lesson. I'd love to know if you'd like to see more 15-minute paintings, if you'd love to see more multi-hour paintings. Always reading the comments and just trying to get a gauge on what people like. And I do think I want to try again more of a sketching video as well in the future. Maybe it's a 15-minute challenge. Maybe do a bonus one up over on Patreon. We'll see. But yeah, let me know what you'd like to see. Thank you for being here, and I will see you soon with a new one. As always, stay creative.